Hello YouTube. Today I'm presenting more information I have collected about the Mongolian death worm. My original video will show you previous materials. It is in the attached playlist titled Ivan Yefremov. This way I do not have to rehash, but if I inadvertently repeat myself, so be it. Let's start. In the Russian language literature, the spelling Olgoy Khorkhoi, or less often Alegorchai Khorkhai, is usually used. Translated from Mongolian, Olgoy Khorkhoi means gut worm, or a very large worm. In the Kazakh part of the Kizilkum Desert in the 1940s, one could hear similar legends where this creature was called shuzhik. Literally, it means a sausage. Buryat Soyots are convinced that this creepy worm is a cave creature in general, does not like bright light and crawls out only at dusk. According to some reports, observers did not notice its mouth or eyes, either two tails or two heads on both sides. The length, according to various estimates, is from 50 centimeters to 1 meter. The animal looks like a whitish gut. Sometimes it is said that there are light stripes on the sides, equally evenly rounded at both ends, and at the moment of attack it darkens or changes color and curls into a spiral. In addition to deserts, its habitat is also called stone cree, rock debris, and mountain gorges. Going to such places after sunset was taboo among the local population of Buryatia in the 1940s. Legends about the cryptid were widespread in Mongolia. One of the leaders of the caravans, by the name of Tseven, claimed that Olgoy Khorkhoi lived in the inaccessible tract of the Khalzan Zahe in the southern Gobi, as Kuzmin, Mung Bayar, Oyun Chimeg write in the monograph Amphibians of Mongolia. In some areas of the Gobi, almost all residents claim that in remote places there are worms that kill from a distance. A well-known researcher of the Mongolian People's Republic, the Russian Simukov, also notes the Olgoy Khorkhoi in the Zag Suchin Gobi is quite ordinary. They talk about it a lot and are very afraid. If it appears in the yurt they live, on the surface it appears most often after rains, when the ground is damp. In the yurts, that's the dwellings of the nomads, Olgoy Khorkhoi appears mostly under buckets, where it is damp. They persist in talking about its venom. The color is defined as white brocade. Brocade is rich fabric woven with a raised pattern, typically with gold or silver thread. In addition to Olgoy Khorkhoi, the residents of Tsag Suchin Gobi spoke of Temen Sul Khorkhoi, defining it as tailless, without tail, lizard, considering that Temen Sui is the Mongolian name for the eastern boa constrictor, or Eryx tataricus. Kuzmin and his co-authors believe that Olgoy Khorkhoi is either some other animal or young boa constrictor. A similar hypothesis was adhered to by Gorelov, a senior researcher at the Badkhiz Nature Reserve in Turkmenistan, who showed a specimen of the eastern boa constrictor to one of the eyewitnesses in Mongolia, and that eyewitness confidently called it Olgoy Khorkhoi. Simukov even placed the Olgoy Khorkhoi in a table with the names of local animals common among the Mongols, believing it to be one of the names of the boa constrictor, Temin Suult Mogoi. Geologist Lipovsky from the USSR, who worked in the Mongolian People Republic in the 1960s and 1970s, describes in one of his books how in Noen Somon Their party managed to hear from the old Arats the legends that in the southern Gobi, supposedly inhabited by Olgoi Khorkhoi, the last of the genus of dinosaurs. The old people said that the monster allegedly hides in the saxaul groves, appears suddenly, and woe to the person who finds himself close. He cannot stand the dragon's gaze and dies. The dragon, according to rumors, even wiped out the prospectors who came to its territory in search of precious stones. Kind of reminds me of a South African story about a very interesting serpent. Anyway, a possible prototype of the Olgoi Khorkhoi, Lipovsky considers bizarre images in local stones, in rocks, in particular agalmatolite, to pronounce it correctly, and especially at sunrise or sunset. For example, on one of the samples of the agalmatolite during the expedition, a drawing that looked somewhat like a sitting dragon was unexpectedly revealed, and the Mongols really took it for an Olgoi Khorkhoi. Mizentsev, the Russian science writer, believes that the hypothesis of a powerful electric discharge with which the worm allegedly strikes its victims is flawed. Since the desert sand is a good insulator, to kill or even stun a person, a very large voltage of electric current is required, at least 1000 volts. The scientist is inclined to the hypothesis that most likely the mysterious inhabitant of the desert kills with poison, for example, hydrogen cyanide, which in the conditions of dry and hot desert climate, getting into the air can quickly turn into deadly vapors. He wrote, "One can imagine such a picture. A huge worm at the moment of danger quickly curls into a ring and throws drops of this hydrogen cyanide acid into the air. Evaporation does its job. The victim falls dead." Mizentsev suggests that it may be one of the representatives of the family of the worm-like bipedal millipedes, the Kivsyaks or Julida. In addition, as the author points out, there are species in the family of Kivsyaks that emit just hydrogen cyanide. A similar opinion was held by the Russian writer, well-known Trifonov, who published under the pseudonym Demin. In one of the books of his autobiographical trilogy, he writes, "The centipede is obvious a late degenerate species, and somewhere in the Asian gorges, the original monster has been preserved. Extremely rare, but certainly real." Other assumptions have been put forward about the prototype of the legendary worm, an unknown species of skink, or Cincida, a close relative of the biped or Amphisbaenia, which lost limbs during evolution, a large annelid worm, which adapted to living in desert conditions, etc. It seems that the very first recorded, on paper so to say, mention of Olgoi Khorkhoi can be attributed to the time of Genghis Khan. There is such a forbidden city, you see. It is called Potala, located in Tibet. It's the residence of the Dalai Lama and is located at an altitude of 2,400 meters above sea level. They say Genghis Khan wanted to feel like a god, and for this he ordered to grab a Potala to sit on a massive stone throne in the sacred hall. I think by me saying grab, to conquer. Anyway, however, his warriors near Potala were scattered to shreds by some invisible force. Rashid al-Din, the biographer and personal chronicler of Genghis Khan's exploits, mentioned that the soldiers were killed by flying logs. What is, maybe this was the army of the Olgoi Khorkhoi? It has been known about Olgoi Khorkhoi in Central Asia for a very long time. But Europeans were able to learn about the mysterious inhabitant of the sands in the second half of the 19th century, when the famous traveler and naturalist, a Russian military officer, Nikolai Mikhailovich Przewalski, mentioned it in his notes. You can see my video about Przewalski, by the way, a very unusual person. And he had quite interesting exploits. Anyway, from 1870 to 1886, he made 4 trips to unexplored areas of Central Asia. The Europeans never got there before him. The Kundlun mountain systems, northern Tibet, the upper reaches of the Yellow River, the Gobi Desert, northern Mongolia. He recorded his observations on fauna and flora in detail, but Przewalski did not have to encounter with Olgoi Khorkhoi. There are no records of such an encounter in the traveler's diary. I have to tell you something. According to one well-noted Ukrainian researcher, Alexander Kulsky, not all of the diaries of Przewalski have been declassified, meaning that there is some information that is still not available for researchers. Very interesting. Anyway, here is what the travelers put down. If he did write something about the monster worm, it was only from the words of the local residents, and apparently just a few lines without attaching importance to it. Very interesting about Mongolia. The scientist Dondogijin Tsevegmid suggests that there is not one kind of worm, but at least 2. Again, folk legends force him to draw a similar conclusion. Local residents often talk about Sharkhorkhoi, that is a yellow worm. A few more details. In one of his books, Dondogijin Tsevegmid mentions the story of a camel driver who met face-to-face with such Sharkhorkhoi in the mountains. The yellow worm was encountered in the mountains of Tost, southwest Mongolia, by the eyewitness, this camel driver. He noticed that yellow worms were climbing out of holes in the ground and crawling towards him. Mad with fear, the camel driver rushed to run and then found that almost 50 of these disgusting creatures were trying to surround him. The poor fellow was lucky. He still managed to escape. And it was possible to get away from them only by increasing the speed of his run, so to say. So far, this Mongolian cryptozoological puzzle is being solved by Mongolian researchers. Well, being solved and solved have 2 different meanings. I'm not sure how far they have advanced. So today, researchers of the Mongolia phenomenon are inclined to believe that we're talking about a living being, completely unknown to science. Mongols, I think most of them will tell you that the dangerous worm Olgoi Khorkhoi exists. But again, so far no one has managed to catch it, but that's as far you and I know, because there have been expeditions we're not privy to. And it's quite possible that a military force, let's say China or Russia, were able to catch it. We just don't know enough. I know the United States, from the open sources, from what I have heard, is also very much interested in this being. So who knows? The search for this sausage stump, as it's called sometimes, in the Gobi Desert, has been going on for several decades, but the official open source result is still 0. So what kind of a creature is this, which according to rumors kills its victim with an electric discharge or a poisonous jet? Let me give you one Mongolian phrase. Gadnechan Olgoi Khorkhoig, Mongolian deathworm Gedeg. Foreigners called Olgoi Khorkhoi Mongolian deathworm. And let's leave it at this. I will bring you any further information that becomes available in the open sources, and I read them in a number of languages, if it's anything worthwhile. Please see my first video for some other information. Of course, the famous story by Ivan Yefremov about this very unusual cryptid, and more information. Thank you for your attention to my research. Please support me through the links you will find in the description to this video. Please kindly tell others about my work and like my videos.